I have my phone in my hand just because I have a few notes to keep me on track. I don't have a lot here. I know I want to first say thank you for coming out and giving me your time today. I appreciate you having me. I know everybody's got busy schedules and whatnot. My name is Jeanna Hoch. You can learn more about how I got to be in front of you today. I have a website, jeannahoch.com, JeannaHoch.com, if you care. But in short, I've been a public critic of gender identity since 2014. So a lot of my work has been focused around women's sex-based rights for several years now. I got invited tonight, though, to talk mostly about my most recent work with Save Women's Sports. Save Women's Sports is a nonpartisan organization founded by a mom just like me. The woman's name is Beth Stelzer. She's from Minnesota. You know, just an American gal. She was a power lifter and actually got challenged by a man who ruined her chance to compete by protesting his exclusion in women's competition. Save Women's Sports has been deemed a hate group by many, actually. It would be easier to say who hasn't deemed Save Women's Sports a hate group. However, our mission is to maintain the right of girls and women to have single-sex competition. I mean, it's that simple. And this used to be common sense. This didn't used to be a hot-button issue that was considered, something Republicans were just picking up to gain voter points or to press on a social issue. Like, everybody knew why women's sports existed and support it. It is still wildly popular. Despite what the media would have you believe, it is over 70% in most polls. An organization called Women's Liberation Front did a poll. I don't remember in what states it was exactly, but they have all the information on their website. Please go and check it out. Again, Women's Liberation Front, also known as WOLF. But their polling has also showed, and they're nonpartisan as well. In fact, most of their board is liberal, actually. And their polling also shows that wildly unpopular to dismantle sex-based competition, single-sex competition for girls and women. On that note, a TikTok I made of participating in this protest of men and women's sporting divisions, and this protest gained national media attention, and not just for one day, how the cycles go. It was like a week and a half, 2 weeks that we were still getting people writing about, talking about, interviewing about our protest, which is, kind of big deal in today's world. And I just did a little TikTok about my experience with it and showed a clip that was on the national media site, and it got taken off the platform immediately. So we're not allowed to speak about what is happening, or just like biological reality in general. So this protest that I went to was in mid-March. I left my 3 children to travel to Atlanta, Georgia, to protest the NCAA Women's National Swimming and Diving Championship because it's now effectively a co-ed competition. I'm sure most of you have heard about Leah Thomas, the swimmer who has been just cleaning house with women's records until he got so much national attention and then started losing. Surprise, surprise. I was there. It was, I don't know much about swimming. I could have cared less to attend a swimming competition before that event, and it was very obvious to me that he was not putting his all into it. So, the young women and their families have been forced into silence. Over and over, that's what we spoke to so many people that said that. that they wanted to talk about it and they wanted to stand up and they wanted to join us in protesting, but they just were not, they didn't feel like they could. And when I say that, they feel forced, I just want to highlight some of the things that are happening to women when we do stand up. We risk our jobs, we lose business, we are doxxed, we are threatened, we are hit, we are threatened with rape, we are threatened with murder. I specifically was told my baby should die when I was pregnant. I can go on and on. Like, this is not a peaceful opposition group. I actually have not dealt with so much hostility since my protesting for abortion. So with actually Republicans, against Republicans. So yes, I did leave my 3 kids at home, and I want to mention again why I brought up my children at all is just to highlight that I am a work from home mom. I homeschool my kids and I'm not away from them very often, and so like leaving my kids is really hard for my family and for them and for me. But this issue is so incredibly important that like we all kind of understand like why I'm having to do it. I'm excited to be here tonight because I feel it's our demographic, the same-sex attracted crowd, who are used in order to proliferate the trans agenda, which demands the denial of biological sex, which is kind of what you were talking about, which is, I think is funny because we did not talk about this, but we're right here.
Steal too much from you.
It's just, yeah, it's how I feel very strongly about that, and I don't care for it at all. I don't like being used or feeling like I've been used or misled. To be most clear, the trans agenda, when I mention that, they want us to deny what we see with our own eyes. They want us to believe that that human beings can change sex, right? So like everybody has to be forced to not only believe this, but participate in the belief. And I very much feel as though it's gotten to be a religious demand. You know, this is a belief system that we can't really verify. When I look at a man, I have no idea what's in his head. I just know what I can see. And when I have to forego what I can see and forego what I know to be true in order to participate in society, we are no longer in, you know, a freedom-loving democratic state. Like, it's just not happening anymore. And how were same-sex individuals used, you might be thinking, and all I can respond really to that is like, how brilliant was it to attach gender identity beliefs to the LGBTQ? The movement, and then call anyone who dares question it a homophobe or a bigot. You know, so you have to remember this is on the heels of gays in the military and same-sex marriage. Now, how many of you remember the movement, the gay movement, same-sex movement of the 80s, 90s, 2000s? Remember the movement of the 80s, but I do remember the 90s and early 2000s quite well. And I don't believe it was ever a movement about compelled speech. And it was never meant to deny what is easily seen with our own eyes or to force people to pretend that men are women. And speaking of being forced to see something with our own eyes that's not there, during my trip to protest in the NCAA in Atlanta, I got to see Leah Thomas with my own 2 eyes, up close and personal. We shared breakfast together every morning that we were there. We just happened to be staying in the same hotel, like crazy coincidence. And I was closer to him than I am to y'all now. There is zero ambiguity to his reproductive sex. None. The man is 6'4", easily. Has a gigantic Adam's apple.
Gigantic what?
Adam's apple. He has a very deep voice. Big dude. Big hands, big feet. And I say this only, you know, to point out the ridiculousness of the whole farce. What these girls are expected to pretend and what they're being forced, again, to do because they're going to lose their places, their ability to even compete. They're going to be kicked off the team. They're going to lose their scholarships. If they don't have that, they might be denied their opportunity to get the education. I mean, this is how deep it's going. And I detail my experience in Georgia even more for the Feminist Current, so I hope y'all will check it out. I wrote a little piece about what I saw with my own eyes and how it made me feel to hear his voice. And again, he's been taking estrogen for a year, 2 years, I think, actually. But he's been on the team for 1 year. Prior to that, he was on the men's team for 3. So it was just like with a snap of a finger and a few little drugs, and next thing you know, like, we're all supposed to pretend for his emotional state with little regard, no regard to the emotional state of the girls and their families and everything they had worked so hard for. Because besides the devastation of the girls and their families to be forced to compete against a man and pretend this man is a woman, was the concrete evidence provided by my brief interaction with Thomas that confirmed what I already knew to be true, is that the media is not only complicit in the programming of society, but is actively engaged. The media relies on heavy Photoshop and angles to trick their audience into believing Thomas matches his female contenders, when it's so obvious in person that he is a man in every single way we know what a man means, right? Now, this may seem unbelievable, but one of the most common questions I receive is, well, why shouldn't men be able to compete in the women's division? Only it's usually framed as, why wouldn't you want women to be able to compete against women? And now we get to the crux of the issue, which is actually like far bigger and encompasses all of women's rights, and not just our right to single-sex competition, but our rights, our sex-based rights to resources and protections. And this is this, that the far left, and by default, the LGBTQIA++, has demanded we all adopt the political slogan and trans mantra of trans women are women. And again, it's a political slogan. It is the mantra of a belief system, faith-based. We should not be all forced to participate in a country where we're supposed to have freedom from religion, freedom of religion. So it is because of this that why I've become so passionate to get involved really with the log cabin Republicans specifically is to implore this community, the LGB community, driven by us on the right, to break away from the trans mania and all other demographics of people who have attached themselves to us but have nothing to do with sexual orientation. Same-sex attracted folks must stand firm for biological reality and hold the line for the sex-based rights of women and girls. And with that, I'd like to push you, I guess, to go and check out the web pages of LGB Fight Back and the LGB Alliance, 2 organizations who are already trying to separate themselves from the rest of the alphabet soup because of the damage that's happening to other demographics and women's rights, and even the rights of same-sex attracted people. I mean, I don't know how much you're aware of, but right now, lesbians, for instance, are under attack for saying that they are only interested in having sex with lesbians because, of course, trans women can be lesbians now. So if a lesbian says no to penis, then she is a transphobe. So we're eating ourselves, you know? We don't even have our same-sex rights that we fought so hard for now because trans rights are everything. And on that note, the state of Colorado, I don't know if you know this as well, but has changed what it means. Gender orientation is now gender identity orientation. So sexuality is same gender rather than same sex. Okay, just fact check me. I hope you do. So really I can go on and on talking about not only the men and women's sports and boys and girls sports issue, but this problem with the takeover of women's and girls sports for men who identify as women. but I'm also very interested in answering specific questions. So if anyone has anything for me, like I would love to hear from you. Hi. Thank you. So what she asked was if there are any women's sports groups that are boycotting, their competitions, and it's really not yet. They're relying on activists to do it for them because they don't want to lose their spot on the podium. They don't want to lose their chance to compete. They don't want to be pointed at and called transphobic. So that was the number one response I got from young female athletes when I said, why aren't you speaking up? Like, you have to start speaking up for yourself. You know this isn't right, and what is preventing you? I'm afraid to be called transphobic. They are afraid of being called a name because they have been indoctrinated to such a point that it's like as bad as being called a Nazi or a racist or a homophobe. It's all in line that if you recognize biological sex and you tell a boy that he doesn't belong there, you are a horrible person and you deserve the worst.
And I mean, the fear is also justified because yes, women are losing their jobs. Parents are losing their kids to not recognizing them as whatever gender that they say they are. Like that's happening right now.
Right. And this is a very top-down thing, right? So it's coming all the way from the the World Health Association and the IOCC. So they're the ones putting out what are we to follow, right? What are the rules for all the other sporting agencies? And although the NCAA did not adhere to the new rules for the swimming, they're all kind of bouncing off of each other and kicking the can down the road. Like who is going to actually stand up for women and girls when all of them are going, not me, not right now. I don't want to be called the bigot. I don't want to lose sponsors. I don't want corporations to pull out. I mean, they're threatening states that say, hey, if you protect women and girls' rights to single-sex competition, we are going to pull our company away.
But the interesting thing, and she was pointing this out yesterday, is that you don't see the reverse. You don't see trans men or trans women trying to compete in men's sports.
Right, so women who would identify as a man are not pushing over men trying to compete. First of all, they can't qualify. and that speaks right there to the biological advantage men have. Like, the fact that we even have to have this discussion is silly. I feel like I've wasted so much of my professional time and, my money, my energy, everything. And I'm like, I have to. We're fighting about things that were already long settled. I mean, some of the arguments are absolutely ridiculous to say that the reason that women's sports exist, this is straight from the trans crowd, okay? I talked to college students who were counter-protesting us for hours while I was there. The reason women's sports exist is because of misogyny, and that men didn't want to get beaten in their own divisions, so they created women's sports so that they would not have to lose to women. That was one of the things that I was told. Another, I was told the girls just need to try harder. They just need to work harder. I get told that a lot. And I'm like, this is coming from the left. This is coming from the crowd that is supposed to be and has snatched the title of women's rights protectors for decades. So.
And it's sad that it's actually harming the true trans that is, that is actually going through the full transition and is not doing it just because it's the fad or because they're going to gain something from it.
I have a couple of thoughts about that. I mean, first would be the term true trans. For women and girls and how we are to fight against our rights, like, I just can't recognize the idea of true trans because I cannot know what is in the mind of a man, right? Like, teaching girls and women to trust whatever a man says about him is really dangerous. So I feel like if there was a thing as a true trans, they would be the first people not to invade the spaces of women and girls, because they would truly get it. And unfortunately, that is part of the recipe or the equation that I feel like is really just fallen to the wayside in the last decade or so. But that might be another conversation for another day. I don't want to offend anyone. I understand people have their deep held beliefs and they are entitled to them. And I want people to feel comfortable expressing themselves however they want and with whatever personality and sexuality that makes them feel good. What cannot happen, however, is at the expense of other groups that have rights and have been oppressed over a time by another group of people. I mean, women's rights and our ability to compete with each other and really to organize is stemmed from hundreds of years of historical oppression by men. And for us to not be able to look at a person and say, you're the oppressor, that's pretty bad.
Do you think that it's just going to be an anomaly meeting women in prison?
It's been happening.
Yeah.
Rape is already happening. Usually I have my Keep Women's Prison Single Sex button on, but I took it off today to not confuse the issue. But it is absolutely relevant. So we have men being housed in a girls' juvenile detention center in California right now.
A 26-year-old man.
Yeah.
Held in a juvenile detention center with girls.
And and this goes down to our locker rooms too. Like it gets really silly to have to argue about stuff like this, but we're having to, right? I know of parents just right here in town whose kids are holding their bladders because they don't know where to go, because the opposite sex is allowed to just walk right in, and it makes them feel violated. I would say it's worse than being uncomfortable, because a lot of people would respond to that, well, like, deal with it. Your comfort's not my problem. But being violated is, actually. It is the problem of society when women feel violated, when girls feel violated because they don't have a space to use the restroom or change their clothing. And the locker room issue is pretty big, given that women from Penn University have already expressed that Leah Thomas walks right in and just exposes himself. I mean, this used to be considered indecent exposure. You had to agree to go to a nude beach. You had to agree to go to an adult place to see other people's junk that you may or may not know. It was not ever a thing where you were in your space designated for your sex and you were being exposed to other body parts that, I'm sorry, but until rape exists, I don't want to be exposed to a stranger's penis until rape goes away.
Does he have original equipment? But he, as one of the teammates put, he's attracted to women.
Right.
And
He claims himself to be a lesbian. So here we go back to how it affects our group. So if trans women are women and trans women are lesbians, then yes. It can really get complicated. And I think that the thing that matters most is, why did we have space separate from men to begin with? It wasn't because we feel like it. It wasn't just because we're being mean women and, no boys allowed. It's for our safety and our dignity. So.
Is it a power thing?
Thank you. My son would say the same thing, and he's 17.
The other thing I told you with the Denver Pride Gala in September, they made all the bathrooms like same-sex bathrooms, and I felt uncomfortable.
Too.
I'm like, I don't know, like, I feel like I needed to go in, do what I needed to
Get out.
I didn't feel comfortable. I
Right.
can't like tell a woman.
Right. So even if you take away the safety part, right. Yes.
A woman would feel there's an element of danger there.
Right.
I
I get that.
If there wasn't anybody around. People watch the door because there weren't men in the women's bar. They had to have a men's bathroom.
Are there any questions from the Zoom viewers by chance? I just don't want to ignore them. Hi, everybody. Because women inherently still know that they are vulnerable around a bunch of men. They still have a female body. Your gender identity is not going to save you from being raped by a group of men. Sorry, that's not going to happen. And no matter what they want to tell themselves, inherently they know that. You know.
Several things. First, these girls that I realize they have their scholarships and all this, if they're not willing to take a stand, then they're finished. They're finished. You've got to, at some point, they're going to have to basically say this is not right, and let's take a stand on this. I mean, I don't know if you ever read Euripides, was it Strada?
No.
Basically, all the women in Greece were tired of their husbands going off to battle. They got together and decided, we're not having sex. You guys go to war again, that's it, we're done. And they did. They stopped having sex with their husbands. They finally got the husbands to agree not to go to war. Okay. The bottom line is that they need to take a unified stand here. They need to boycott these sports. They need to walk off the field. They need to basically tell them, we're not playing until this is fixed. Because until they do that, this is going to continue. It is not going to go away. And the other side is going to keep pushing on this issue.
I can't say I disagree. What I would like to see happen is really, take a knee, turn your back, do something, show up, train your butt off, but don't compete. You have to take a stand somewhere. And I did just realize that I forgot about some alumni group of swimmers. I think it was Arizona State. A bunch of women did write a letter. So they've retired. They're not still in the sport, but there is slowly starting to be some organization between former athletes.
I think they're probably going to see the younger generation stepping up. The women now have kind of opened the door as far as recognizing the problem, putting it out there to the public. And the ones behind them are going to see that it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
You can step up. So I think you're going to hear more voices and reactions.
The problem too is also with Title IX and Biden's new executive order. Right now I can't just sue my school board or sue the Board of Education for my state. I've got to take on the federal government. And so we all know how hard that is because a lot of these directives are coming, again, top down. We're looking at IOC, Biden, and this way instead of grassroots and the people. What the people want is not have single-sex competition. I mean, we have co-ed competition. Nobody is saying co-ed competition is bad or wrong or shouldn't exist. It's great. Girls should be able to compete with boys, fine. But the girls who don't want to shouldn't have to. So, do y'all have any questions?
No, I think, didn't one of the teammates come out and say that she was even asked to not have the fourth place trophy?
So I actually was there, and what did happen is they tied for fifth place. And so he had already won earlier competition. I believe it was the 100. Well, I think it was the 100, and then
he won, and then the 100 he came in.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. The 500 he won first, and then it was the 200 and the 100 that he came in 5th and 8th. You're right. So, which was kind of like, oh, you could kick ass and take names in the 500, but in the 100 you were struggling. That blew my mind.
I think that was probably on purpose.
Oh, it was. I'm the girls were just kicking their feet so hard, and then he was just, and his legs were barely going. So I don't know. He did not want to point out what was already being pointed out and what had been pointed out all season long because we had already been there for 24, 48 hours. We made a big stink in Atlanta, Georgia. We were not quiet. We rode a truck through Atlanta with signs and we're honking and we have our megaphones and through the city, all the traffic, and people were just cheering us on. We really had very little opposition. It was unexpected.
Ultimately, they didn't know it. So the girls who are competing right now, that's ultimately what needs to happen, is that they need to.
Well, at their schools, they don't have support. They're being told, I mean, Penn State girls were told that they couldn't wear their jackets, they couldn't wear their university attire. They couldn't be proud of their university and the team that they worked so hard to join and be a part of because of the Leah Thomas controversy. However, he was wearing in all the pictures. It's completely unfair. Every single day that I saw him, he was sitting with the coach, not the other girls. I mean, it was.
He's not even complete trans. No, since he still has his male parts.
Absolutely. He still looks like a
That
male.
right there should have been an issue. It's not.
It's not. It's not because women have penises now. Because the penis is no longer a male sex organ. It can be male or female. I mean, these are the lies that they're being told, the lies that are being pushed, what we're being forced to say and admit. This is part of why I pulled my daughter out of school, was because, you know, the forced pronouns. How am I to teach my daughter she has to be forced to lie? She knows, she sees a boy, she sees a man, and she knows what a man is, has known since she was like 18 months old, could say the word vulva. You know, like, my kid's not confused. I don't want anyone confusing them. So.
In other words, your daughter can define what a woman is better than an incoming Supreme Court justice.
Bingo. It's not difficult. My 2-year-old now, it's biological, it's an evolutionary ability to, and especially for women, it's to protect ourselves. And we can see a man from, 100 yards away in the night. And it's so that we don't get attacked. It's very important. Animals can see sex, babies know sex. My baby never tried to, I have 3 breastfed babies. None of them tried to nurse from their dads. If they went, they quickly, nope, that's wrong. Not the nipple I was going for. Because they can smell. They can smell it. I mean, it's so deep in our ability to see sex quickly and easily that it's abusive to small children and to women and girls to be forced to pretend that we cannot see a man when we easily can. So.
The thing also is that they're trying to change our perception of reality, because sex and gender is not the same thing.
Correct.
Gender is whatever you want it to be, and you can have as many genders as you identify with. And the important thing is not what you're born with, but what you identify with. The thing I can't get my head around is the they. What the hell is a they? But that's another conversation. I agree.
Well, and words are so important. I mean, I'm sure we all realize that defining words is how our law is made. If we can't define words, we can't fight for ourselves, for what we believe is right, for our freedoms. It's the basis of our law. And when we have things like sex being conflated with gender identity in law, it renders the protections and the resources for a particular group, a specific group, meaningless. So women and girls can't have sex-based rights and resources if we can't define sex, if we don't admit biological sex exists, or if we prioritize gender identity over biological reality.
I think that's maybe a positive coming out of, one of the few positives coming out of COVID. Parents seeing what their kids were learning in school,
Yes,
Yeah.
probably.
finding out that what they were being taught wasn't exactly what the parents wanted.
There's a major movement right now with moms and, public schools, getting back our public schools. They've become indoctrination centers.
Well, I mean, it's been obviously going on for a while, because now they're college instructors. So,
True. Now that I look back, I feel like I was definitely indoctrinated in college back in 2011, 10, and earlier. So, yeah, I agree with you.
So I recently saw where Gloria Steinem came out and supported
Yes.
trans.
Well, all of the major women's organizations are. I mean, I've been blocked by some of the bigger women's feminist groups on Twitter for stating things like, men exist, men can't be women.
So I was wondering what your take is. Why are some of these first wave feminists who knew what it was like to when women were really oppressed, why are they buying into the whole?
They don't want to be canceled. They don't want to be there. I cannot stress enough what the fear of being called transphobic publicly has done to society. And this is why I brought up the point of we have been used. They took the steam from gay rights and same-sex marriage legalization in 2015 and just ran with it. Like, you cannot talk bad about this group. We are part of the gay community, so if you talk bad or you challenge us or you question us, it's as bad as you being a gay basher. So you must believe men can be women, and if you fight for women's rights, you are a Nazi. I've been called that many times. Anything else?
Yeah, one question. Most people are not going to become as active as you are, even if they care.
Right.
Most people aren't going to be activists. What is something that everyone could do, even on a smaller scale, to make a difference?
Sign petitions. There's several of them on some of the websites that I mentioned before. Join other groups. Send money. Save Women's Sports definitely needs donations. And I'm not even a official, I'm not getting paid by them. I just really believe in their mission. So when I say send them money, it's not to me. It is to this organization that I believe so strongly in because they're doing amazing things. And they're showing up to testify at state capitals. Anytime this conversation comes up, don't be afraid to talk about it. I know that seems like such a small thing, but the more people that stop being afraid, then the easier it will be to push back against this.
So would you suggest contacting, even at an elementary level, school districts and things like that, or should we go for high school, college? Where do you think the most value will be?
I feel like I've gotten nowhere with years of battling Denver Public Schools, and I know that sounds defeating, but it is. And I would not recommend anyone spend the time, energy, or money that I have on a local level at this time with what has happened with the Biden executive order and what's going on. I mean, I would talk, if I'm going to write letters, it would be to the NCAA directly, college coaches. I would love to write a group letter to the coach of Penn and get a response back. Like, how can you be a coach of all of these girls and just completely abandon them for this man?
Change the game of basketball.
They're just...
Trans playing basketball. And, I have friends that are trans, and they don't want to be identified as that. They want to be either a guy or a girl.
Well, that's one of the arguments they say is like we should just get rid of sex competition altogether and just do by height or weight classifications. And my thing is, no, height classification or weight classification, those are ways to classify, like age. We don't allow someone of my age to compete with preschoolers, right? Sex is another way to classify. You can't just replace this type of classification with another classification system and consider it fair, because it's not. We're a different sex.
Not being sexist, saying a man's body is different than a woman's.
Correct. It's understanding reality.
That's just the way it is.
Yes.
I would like to be a sex guy, but on other levels I'm not. As much as I may try, I don't physically have the same body.
Yeah.
So it would totally change the game of other sports. Not just
Well, it has changed the game for like certain I wouldn't say industries, sorry, wrong word, but competitions like indoor bike cycling. It's almost completely trans women now. And this roller derbying has completely been overrun by men. Certain sports, it's happened to worse than others.
Well, I think until the sport that the most outspoken have men come into, like women's soccer. When some of these women get bounced around, by some guy that's,
Well, Megan Rapinoe supports it. Megan Rapinoe is one of the, most famous women's soccer players. Now she won't, but she supports men and women's team. I'm like, nobody would know who you were if it was co-ed. Right. The only reason anybody knows the name Megan Rapinoe is because she had opportunities that have now been taken from my daughters. She got her ass handed to her by high school students, so. But I think that's my biggest problem is nobody can convince me that it's progressive or that it is advancing the rights of women and girls to take something away from my daughters that I had. If somebody can explain to me, then I will gladly stop protesting. I will sit down, I will hang up my little buttons and I will never talk about saving women's sports again, but I don't understand how taking away from my daughters is a positive. When I was a little girl, I had the ability to just compete with other little girls. I didn't have to worry about little boys' feelings. And I think that my little girls deserve the same thing. I really appreciate you all, and thank you so much for having me tonight. Thank you.